The dust settled on the dirt road as Sophia Lawson's trembling fingers clutched the worn handle of her valise, her last possession in a world that had taken everything else from her. It was 1878 in the frontier town of Eagar, Arizona Territory, and at 19 years old, she had traveled across the country with nothing but a name scribbled on a piece of paper, and the desperate hope that somewhere, somehow, she might find refuge from the nightmare she'd fled in Boston. The Arizona sun beat down mercilessly as Sophia stood before the imposing two-story house at the edge of town. The Blackwell residence was the grandest in Eagar, owned by Thaddeus Blackwell, the wealthiest rancher and businessman in Apache County. She had been told that the Blackwells needed a maid, and with no money, no family, and nowhere else to turn, Sophia had no choice but to seek employment where she could find it. She knocked on the door, clutching a letter of recommendation from her previous employer in Boston, a kindly woman who had helped her escape after her parents' deaths, had left her vulnerable to her uncle's cruelty. The door swung open, revealing a stern-faced woman with iron-gray hair pulled back so tightly it seemed to stretch her skin. "You must be the girl from Boston," the woman said, her eyes narrowing as she examined Sophia from head to toe. "I am Mrs. Agatha Blackwell. My husband manages most affairs in this town, and I manage this household." Sophia nodded, unable to find her voice. The woman's cold demeanor reminded her too much of her uncle, and she felt the familiar tightness in her chest that came with fear. "You'll be expected to work from dawn until dusk. You'll have Sundays free to attend church, though I expect you back immediately after the service to prepare Sunday dinner. You'll be provided room and board and $5 a month." Mrs. Blackwell's tone made it clear there would be no negotiation. "And one more thing, my husband detests noise. You will speak only when spoken to, and then only as much as necessary to complete your duties. Is that understood?" Sophia nodded again, swallowing hard. "Verbal responses, girl. I need to know you can follow instructions." "Yes, madam," Sophia managed, her voice barely above a whisper. "Better," Mrs. Blackwell said. "Now follow me. I'll show you your quarters and explain your duties." The room was little more than a closet tucked away at the back of the house with a narrow cot, a small chest for her belongings, and a tiny window that looked out onto the stable yard. But it was clean and it was safe, and for now, that was all Sophia could ask for. That night, as she lay on the thin mattress, staring at the unfamiliar ceiling, Sophia allowed herself a moment of grief for all she had lost: her beloved parents, her home in Boston, her dreams of becoming a teacher. But as tears slid silently down her cheeks, she reminded herself that she was alive. And for the first time in months, she wasn't afraid to close her eyes. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months as Sophia learned the rhythm of life at the Blackwell house. She rose before dawn to light the fires and prepare breakfast, spent her mornings cleaning, her afternoons laundering and ironing, and her evenings serving dinner and washing dishes. Mrs. Blackwell was demanding but fair, and Mr. Blackwell barely seemed to notice her existence. The rule of silence was strictly enforced. When Thaddeus Blackwell was home, Sophia moved through the house like a ghost, careful not to make the floorboards creak or allow the dishes to clatter. She spoke only when directly addressed, which was rare, and then only in hushed tones. Her only respite came on Sundays when she attended church. There, she could sing hymns with the congregation, feeling a temporary release as her voice joined with others in praise. Even then, she was careful not to stand out, to keep her naturally melodious voice blended with the rest. And in the rare moments when she was truly alone, usually late at night in her tiny room or early in the morning when she fetched water from the well before anyone else was awake, Sophia would sometimes allow herself to sing softly songs her mother had taught her, old folk tunes that reminded her of happier times. Spring turned to summer, and Sophia settled into her new life. She was not happy exactly, but she was safe, and there was comfort in the predictable routine of her days. She learned to find small joys the way the morning light filtered through the kitchen windows, the satisfaction of a well-polished silver service, the scent of fresh baked bread, that she sometimes got to enjoy a slice of while it was still warm. On a particularly hot July morning, Sophia rose even earlier than usual, unable to sleep in the stifling heat of her little room. She made her way to the well in the pre-dawn darkness, hoping to complete some of her chores before the day's heat became unbearable. As she cranked the handle of the well, drawing up the bucket of cool water, a song rose to her lips, an old lullaby her mother used to sing. Sophia didn't even realize she was singing aloud, her voice clear and sweet in the still morning air, until she heard the sound of a horse approaching. She fell silent immediately, mortified at having broken the cardinal rule of the household, even outside its walls. She turned to see who had caught her in this transgression, praying it wasn't Mr. Blackwell himself. It wasn't. It was a man she had never seen before, tall and broad-shouldered, with dark hair and a strong jawline shadowed with several days' growth of beard. He sat atop a magnificent Palomino horse, his clothes dusty from the trail. He wasn't dressed like the businessmen who sometimes came to call on Mr. Blackwell, nor like the ranch hands who worked the Blackwell spread. His clothes were practical but well made, and the gun on his hip looked worn from use rather than ornamental. "Don't stop on my account," the stranger said, his voice deep but gentle. "That was the prettiest thing I've heard in months of riding." Sophia ducked her head, her cheeks burning. "I'm sorry, sir. I didn't know anyone was about." "Nothing to be sorry for," he replied, dismounting with the easy grace of a man who had spent most of his life in the saddle. "I'm Cole Crawford, just rode in from Texas, looking for work with the Blackwell outfit." "I'm Sophia," she replied, forgetting in her nervousness that she should have given her last name as well. "I'm the maid at the Blackwell house." "Well, Sophia," he said, tipping his hat, "it's a pleasure to meet you. Is the boss up yet? I heard he might be hiring on a new foreman." "Not yet, sir. Mr. Blackwell doesn't usually come down until 7. She hesitated, then added, "But you could wait in the stable yard if you like. I could bring you some coffee when it's ready." Cole Crawford smiled, and Sophia felt something flutter in her chest, something she hadn't felt in a very long time. "That's mighty kind of you," he said. "I'd appreciate that." Sophia hurried back to the house, her heart racing. There was something about the way Cole Crawford had looked at her, not as a servant, not as a piece of furniture, but as a person. It had been so long since anyone had really seen her that she'd almost forgotten what it felt like. As she prepared breakfast, she occasionally glanced out the kitchen window toward the stable yard, where Cole was brushing down his horse, his movements methodical and gentle. There was a quiet confidence about him that intrigued her. When the coffee was ready, Sophia poured a cup and carried it out to him, careful not to spill it on her way. "Thank you kindly," Cole said, accepting the cup with a smile that reached his eyes. "You have a beautiful voice, Sophia." Made me think of home for a minute there. "You must miss it," she said, surprising herself with her boldness. "Texas, I mean, parts of it," he admitted. "Not enough to go back, though. I'm looking forward, not back." He took a sip of the coffee. "This is good. Best I've had since leaving Fort Worth." "I should get back," Sophia said, suddenly remembering her place. "Mrs. Blackwell will be down soon." Cole nodded, understanding in his eyes. "Of course. Thank you for the coffee, Sophia. I hope I'll see you again." "Good luck with Mr. Blackwell," she said, turning to go. "He's particular about who he hires." "I've heard," Cole replied, "but I've got references and experience, and I'm not afraid of hard work." Sophia hurried back to the kitchen, her mind full of the stranger with the kind eyes and the deep voice who had listened to her sing and hadn't minded at all. Later that morning, she overheard Mr. Blackwell talking to Mrs. Blackwell in the study. "Hired the Crawford fellow," Thaddeus Blackwell said. "Seems competent enough. Former Army scout, knows the territory. Says he can help with those rustlers that have been hitting the North Range." "I hope you're right," Mrs. Blackwell replied. "We can't afford to lose any more cattle." "He starts tomorrow. Have the girl prepare the foreman's quarters out by the bunkhouse." Sophia's heart leaped. Cole Crawford would be staying. She wasn't sure why that made her so happy, but it did. The foreman's quarters were a small cabin about 50 yards from the main bunkhouse where the ranch hands lived. It had been empty for several months since the previous foreman had moved on to California. Sophia spent the afternoon cleaning it, beating the dust from the mattress, scrubbing the floors and polishing the small cookstove until it gleamed. As she worked, she hummed softly to herself, forgetting for a moment the rule of silence that had governed her life for nearly a year. When she realized what she was doing, she stopped immediately, but not before a small smile had crept onto her face. Something about knowing Cole Crawford was nearby made her feel braver, more like the girl she had been before tragedy had struck her family. The next few weeks passed in a blur of activity. The Blackwell ranch was preparing for the fall roundup, and the house was busier than usual, with ranch hands coming and going, and Mr. Blackwell holding meetings with cattle buyers from as far away as Denver. Sophia caught glimpses of Cole Crawford from time to time riding out with the hands in the early morning, returning dusty and tired in the evening, occasionally coming to the main house to report to Mr. Blackwell. Each time their eyes met, he would tip his hat to her, a gesture that never failed to bring a blush to her cheeks. One evening in late August, Sophia was hanging out the last of the laundry as the sun was setting. The air was cooler than it had been in weeks, and a gentle breeze rustled the cottonwood trees that lined the creek behind the house. Without thinking, she began to sing an old Irish ballad her father had taught her voice carrying in the still evening air. "I've been hoping to hear that again," came a voice from behind her. Sophia spun around to find Cole Crawford leaning against the fence, watching her with a smile. "Mr. Crawford," she gasped, dropping the wet sheet she had been about to hang. "I didn't see you there." "Just Cole, please," he said, stepping forward to pick up the sheet. He handed it back to her, their fingers brushing briefly. "And I didn't mean to startle you. I just couldn't help but stop when I heard you singing." Sophia quickly hung the sheet, acutely aware of his presence behind her. "Mrs. Blackwell doesn't approve of singing," she said quietly. "Mr. Blackwell likes the house to be silent." "Seems a shame to silence a voice like yours," Cole said. "It's like caging a songbird." Sophia turned to face him, surprised by the sincerity in his tone. "It's not so bad," she said, though they both knew it was a lie. "I have a place to live, food to eat. Many have it worse." "That may be true," Cole acknowledged, "but it doesn't make it right." He hesitated, then asked, "How did you come to work for the Blackwells, if you don't mind my asking?" Sophia glanced toward the house, making sure no one was watching. "It's a long story," she said. "I've got time," Cole replied, settling himself more comfortably against the fence. "Unless you need to get back." Sophia checked the position of the sun. Mrs. Blackwell would be occupied with her needlework for at least another hour, and Mr. Blackwell had ridden into town after dinner. "I can stay a little while," she said, surprising herself with her boldness. Cole smiled, and Sophia found herself telling him things she had never told anyone in Eagar about her parents' death from fever, about her uncle's cruelty, about her desperate flight west with nothing but the clothes on her back and a letter of recommendation from her mother's friend. "I was fortunate to find employment so quickly," she concluded. "Many girls in my situation might have ended up in less respectable circumstances." Cole's expression darkened. "You deserve better than to be treated like a ghost in that house," he said. "You're brave, Sophia. Braver than most men I've known." The compliment warmed her more than it should have. "Thank you for listening," she said. "I should finish hanging these clothes before dark." "Let me help you," Cole offered, reaching for another wet sheet from the basket. Together they hung the remaining laundry, working in companionable silence. When they finished, Cole hesitated as if wanting to say something more. "Would you?" he began, then seemed to think better of it. "Never mind, I should let you get back to your duties." "What were you going to ask?" Sophia pressed, curious. Cole ran a hand through his dark hair, a gesture she was coming to recognize as a sign of his nervousness. "I was going to ask if you might meet me by the creek on Sunday after church, just to talk. But I realize that's probably not proper, and I wouldn't want to cause you any trouble with the Blackwells." Sophia knew she should refuse. Meeting a man unchaperoned could cost her position if Mrs. Blackwell found out. But something in Cole's earnest expression made her throw caution to the wind. "I'd like that," she said softly. "I'm usually back from church by noon, but I have to prepare Sunday dinner after. I might be able to slip away around 3 o'clock, once the Blackwells are taking their Sunday rest." Cole's face lit up with a smile that made her heart skip. "I'll be there," he promised. "The big cottonwood with the twisted trunk about a quarter-mile downstream." "I know the one," Sophia said, gathering up her empty laundry basket. "I should go now." "Of course," Cole said, tipping his hat. "Thank you, Sophia, for trusting me with your story." As Sophia hurried back to the house, she felt lighter than she had in months, maybe years. For the first time since coming to Eagar, she had something to look forward to beyond the next day's chores. Sunday couldn't come quickly enough. Sophia found herself counting the hours, then the minutes as the church service ended, and she walked back to the Blackwell house with Mrs. Blackwell, listening to the older woman's critique of Reverend Wilson's sermon. Preparing Sunday dinner was usually a chore Sophia dreaded, but today her hands moved quickly through the familiar tasks of roasting the beef, preparing the vegetables, and baking the apple pie that was Mr. Blackwell's favorite dessert. By 2:30, everything was ready, and the Blackwells were seated in the dining room. "You may serve the coffee in the parlor at 4, Mrs. Blackwell instructed as Sophia cleared the dessert plates, "and prepare a cold supper for 6 o'clock. Mr. Blackwell and I will be attending the sociable at the Hendersons this evening, so you'll have the house to yourself after that." "Yes, madam," Sophia replied, keeping her eyes downcast to hide her excitement. This was better than she had hoped. A few hours of freedom once the Blackwells left for their social engagement. At precisely 3 o'clock, with the Blackwells settled in for their Sunday rest, Sophia slipped out the back door and made her way toward the creek, her heart pounding in her chest. Cole was waiting for her, sitting beneath the twisted cottonwood, tossing pebbles into the slow-moving water. When he saw her approaching, he jumped to his feet, a smile spreading across his face. "I wasn't sure you'd come," he admitted as she drew near. "Neither was I," Sophia confessed, suddenly shy now that they were alone. Cole gestured to a flat rock by the water's edge. "Would you like to sit?" They sat side by side, watching the water flow past, neither speaking for a moment. It was Cole who finally broke the silence. "I've been thinking about you," he said quietly. "About your singing. I've never heard anything like it." Sophia felt her cheeks warm at the compliment. "My mother taught me," she said. "She used to sing in the church choir in Boston. She taught you well." Cole picked up another pebble, turning it over in his fingers. I've been all over this country, Texas, Kansas, Colorado, New Mexico, and I've heard a lot of singing, but nothing like yours. You're too kind, Sophia murmured, embarrassed by his praise. Not kind, just honest. Cole skipped the pebble across the water, watching it bounce 4 times before sinking. Would you sing for me now? Just one song? Sophia hesitated, looking around at the empty landscape. They were far enough from the house that no one would hear her, but still, the habit of silence was deeply ingrained. I'm not sure I remember how, she said, only half joking. Cole's expression softened. I think it's like riding a horse, he said. Once you learn, you never really forget. Sophia took a deep breath, closed her eyes, and began to sing. It was a simple folk song about a girl waiting for her lover to return from the sea, but in Sophia's clear, pure voice, it became something magical, full of longing and hope. When she finished, she opened her eyes to find Cole watching her with an expression of wonder. That was beautiful, he said softly. Thank you. Sophia smiled, feeling a newfound confidence. It felt good, she admitted. To sing properly, I mean, not just humming under my breath. You should sing more often, Cole said. It's a gift, Sophia, a rare one. Not much call for singing as a maid, she replied with a small shrug. And like I told you, the Blackwells prefer silence. What if you weren't a maid? Cole asked, his tone careful. What would you do then? Sophia considered the question. It had been so long since she'd allowed herself to dream beyond her current circumstances that she wasn't sure she remembered how. I used to want to be a teacher, she said finally, before my parents died. I was even accepted to a teaching college in Boston, but then. She trailed off, the memories still painful. You'd make a fine teacher, Cole said. The way you explained about the different kinds of clouds the other day, you have a gift for making things clear. Sophia smiled at the memory. They had met briefly in the stable yard the previous day, and she had pointed out the different cloud formations, explaining what each one meant for the weather. It had been a brief conversation, interrupted by Mrs. Blackwell calling for her, but it had left her feeling more like herself than she had in months. What about you? She asked, turning the conversation away from herself. How did you become a cowboy? Cole laughed. I was born to it, I guess. My father ran cattle in East Texas. Small spread, nothing like what the Blackwells have, but enough to keep food on the table. I learned to ride before I could walk, according to my mother. And your family, are they still in Texas? A shadow crossed Cole's face. No, my parents are gone now. Lost them both to a fever when I was 16. My younger sister lives with my aunt in Fort Worth. She's married now, has a little one of her own. I'm sorry about your parents, Sophia said softly. It's a hard thing losing them young. It is, Cole agreed, but it shapes you, I think. Makes you appreciate the good things when they come along. He gave her a meaningful look that made her heart flutter. They talked for what felt like hours, sharing stories of their childhoods, their dreams, their fears. Cole told her about his years as an Army scout, guiding soldiers through Apache territory, and later as a trail boss, leading cattle drives up to Kansas. Sophia shared memories of Boston, of the books she loved, of her hopes for someday seeing more of the world than just Eagar, Arizona. The sun was beginning to dip toward the horizon when Sophia reluctantly stood. I should get back, she said. The Blackwells will be leaving for their sociable soon, and I need to serve their coffee first. Cole stood as well, towering over her slight frame. Can I see you again? He asked. Not just passing in the yard, I mean, like this. Sophia knew she should refuse. Meeting Cole like this was risky. If Mrs. Blackwell found out, she would certainly lose her position. But looking up into his hopeful face, she couldn't bring herself to say no. The Blackwells go to town every Wednesday afternoon, she said. For Mrs. Blackwell's sewing circle and Mr. Blackwell's business meetings, I usually have a few hours to myself then. Wednesday then, Cole said, his smile lighting up his entire face. Same place. Sophia nodded, already looking forward to it. As she turned to go, Cole caught her hand, his calloused palm warm against her skin. Sophia, he said, his voice low and serious. Thank you for trusting me, for singing for me. It means more than I can say. She squeezed his hand once, then slipped away, hurrying back to the house with her heart full of a feeling she hadn't experienced in years' hope. The next few weeks passed in a blur of secret meetings and stolen moments. Every Wednesday, while the Blackwells were in town, Sophia would slip away to the creek to meet Cole. Sometimes they would walk along the water's edge, talking about everything and nothing. Other times they would sit beneath the twisted cottonwood, and Cole would listen as Sophia sang songs from her childhood. Cole began bringing her small gifts, a wildflower he had picked on the range, a smooth stone shaped like a heart, once even a ribbon for her hair that he had purchased in town. Each one she treasured, hiding them beneath her mattress where Mrs. Blackwell wouldn't find them. As September gave way to October, and the cottonwood leaves turned golden in the crisp autumn air, Sophia found herself falling deeply, irrevocably in love with Cole Crawford. And from the way he looked at her, the way his voice softened when he spoke her name, she believed he felt the same. But their happiness existed in a bubble, separate from the reality of their lives. Cole was the foreman of the Blackwell ranch, respected by the hands and by Thaddeus Blackwell himself. Sophia was a maid, expected to be silent and invisible. The gulf between their positions seemed insurmountable, and then came the day that changed everything. It was a Tuesday in mid-October, unseasonably warm for the time of year. The Blackwells were hosting a dinner party for several prominent ranchers from the surrounding area, along with their wives. Sophia had been cooking and cleaning since dawn, preparing the house for the guests. As she worked, she hummed softly to herself, a habit she had fallen into more frequently since meeting Cole. The melody was an old love song her mother used to sing, about a maiden waiting for her true love to return from the sea. She was so absorbed in her task, polishing the silver in the dining room, that she didn't hear Mrs. Blackwell enter until the older woman was directly behind her. "What do you think you're doing?" Mrs. Blackwell's voice was icy with disapproval. Sophia froze, realizing with horror that she had been singing aloud. "I'm sorry, madam," she stammered. "I didn't realize the rule is silence, girl, silence." Mrs. Blackwell's thin lips were pressed into a tight line. "I have overlooked many of your shortcomings because you are a hard worker, but this is unacceptable." "It won't happen again, madam," Sophia promised, her heart racing. "See that it doesn't," Mrs. Blackwell said. "And make sure the table is properly set before the guests arrive at 6. Mr. Blackwell is expecting everything to be perfect tonight." "Yes, madam." As Mrs. Blackwell left the room, Sophia let out a shaky breath. She had been careless, and it could have cost her dearly. She resolved to be more careful, to keep her songs locked away inside her heart where they belonged. The dinner party that evening was a grand affair by Eagar standards. The Blackwells had invited 3 other ranching families, along with the town banker and his wife, and the mayor and his daughter. As the foreman, Cole was also invited, a sign of Thaddeus Blackwell's growing trust in him. Sophia moved silently through the dining room, serving the elaborate meal she had spent the day preparing. She kept her eyes downcast, as Mrs. Blackwell preferred, but she was acutely aware of Cole's presence at the far end of the table. As she served the dessert course, a raspberry tart with fresh cream, she heard Mr. Blackwell addressing his guests. "I believe we should have some entertainment," he announced, surprising everyone, including his wife. Thaddeus Blackwell was not known for his appreciation of the arts. "My daughter tells me that Miss Henderson plays the piano quite beautifully." The mayor's daughter, a pretty blonde girl of about 20, blushed modestly. "I would be delighted to play for you, Mr. Blackwell, if you have an instrument." "Indeed we do," Mrs. Blackwell said, though she looked somewhat taken aback by her husband's suggestion. "In the parlor." It was my mother's. The guests adjourned to the parlor, where a slightly out-of-tune upright piano stood against the wall. Sophia followed discreetly, ready to serve coffee once the performance was finished. Miss Henderson played competently, if without much passion, a series of popular ballads that had the guests nodding in appreciation. When she finished, there was polite applause. "That was lovely, my dear," Mrs. Blackwell said. "Such accomplishment is a credit to your upbringing." "Thank you, madam," Miss Henderson replied, clearly pleased with the praise. "Does anyone else play?" Mr. Blackwell asked, looking around the room. When no one volunteered, he surprised everyone again by saying, "Perhaps someone would like to sing for us then." There was an awkward silence as the guests looked at one another. None seemed eager to perform, and then Cole Crawford spoke up from where he stood near the door. "If I may, Mr. Blackwell, I believe your maid has a remarkable voice." All eyes turned to Sophia, who felt the blood drain from her face. She shot Cole a panicked look, but he merely smiled encouragingly. "The girl, Sophia." Mrs. Blackwell's voice was sharp with disbelief. "Don't be ridiculous, Crawford. She barely speaks, let alone sings." "I've heard her, madam," Cole said respectfully but firmly. "By the creek one day when I was checking the south pasture fence. She sings like an angel." Thaddeus Blackwell, perhaps emboldened by the several glasses of brandy he had consumed with dinner, looked intrigued. "Is this true, girl?" "Can you sing?" Sophia felt trapped. To deny it would be to call Cole a liar. To admit it might anger Mrs. Blackwell, who had made her feelings about noise in the house quite clear. I used to sing, sir," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper, "in Boston, in the church choir." "Well then," Mr. Blackwell said, waving an expansive hand, "let's hear it. Miss Henderson can accompany you, I'm sure." Miss Henderson nodded, moving back to the piano bench. "What would you like to sing?" she asked Sophia kindly. Sophia's mind raced. The only songs she knew by heart were old folk songs and hymns, nothing suitable for a formal gathering like this. "Perhaps Barbara Allen," she suggested, naming a traditional ballad that most people knew. Miss Henderson nodded, playing a few introductory chords. Sophia took a deep breath, closed her eyes, and began to sing. The room fell silent as her clear, pure voice filled the parlor. She sang with all the emotion she had kept bottled inside for years, the longing, the sorrow, the hope. When she reached the final verse, where Barbara Allen at last repents her cruelty to her lover, but too late to save him, there were tears in several pairs of eyes. As the last note faded away, there was a moment of complete silence. Then the room erupted in applause, startling Sophia so much that she took a step back. "My word," the banker's wife exclaimed. "That was extraordinary." "I've never heard Barbara Allen sung so beautifully," the mayor added, dabbing at his eyes with a handkerchief. "Even Mrs. Blackwell looked impressed, though she quickly masked it with her usual stern expression. But it was Mr. Blackwell's reaction that surprised Sophia the most. He rose from his chair, approached her, and looked at her as if seeing her for the first time. "How long have you been working in my house, girl?" he asked. "A little over a year, sir," Sophia replied, keeping her eyes downcast. "A year," he repeated, shaking his head. "And in all that time I never knew we had such talent under our roof." He turned to his wife. "Agatha, did you know the girl could sing like that?" Mrs. Blackwell looked uncomfortable. I knew she had been in a choir in Boston, she admitted, but I never heard her sing myself. A waste, Mr. Blackwell declared. An absolute waste. He turned back to Sophia. You will sing for our guests whenever we entertain from now on, and you will join the church choir immediately. Thank you, sir, Sophia said, scarcely able to believe what she was hearing. And as for you, Crawford, Mr. Blackwell continued, addressing Cole, you have a good ear. Thank you for bringing this to my attention. Cole nodded, his eyes never leaving Sophia's face. It was my pleasure, sir. I believe talent like hers shouldn't be hidden away. As the guests continued to exclaim over her performance, Sophia caught Cole's eye across the room. He smiled at her, a smile full of pride and something deeper, something that made her heart race. In that moment, Sophia knew that everything was about to change. The days following the dinner party were a whirlwind of change for Sophia. Mr. Blackwell, true to his word, insisted that she join the church choir, even arranging for her to have Wednesday afternoons off to attend practices. Mrs. Blackwell, while still expecting her to complete her duties efficiently, relaxed the rule of silence, allowing Sophia to sing as she worked as long as it wasn't excessively loud or distracting. But the most significant change was in how people looked at her. No longer was she invisible, a silent presence moving through the Blackwell house. Now, people noticed her, spoke to her, asked her to sing at social gatherings, and Cole looked at her as if she were the most precious thing in the world. Their Wednesday meetings continued, but now they were less secretive. With Mr. Blackwell's blessing to attend choir practice, Sophia could meet Cole openly, walking with him to the church and back. They still found time to be alone together, walking by the creek or sitting beneath their cottonwood tree, but the fear of discovery was gone. As November arrived, bringing with it cooler weather and the promise of winter, Cole began to talk about the future. I've been saving, he told her one crisp afternoon as they walked along the creek. Since I was 18, every job, every cattle drive, every month as foreman here, I've put something aside. For what? Sophia asked, curious about the determined look in his eyes. For my own spread, Cole said. Nothing fancy at first, just enough land to run a few hundred head of cattle, a small house, room to grow. Sophia's heart quickened. That sounds wonderful, she said softly. Cole stopped walking, turning to face her. It would be, he agreed, taking her hands in his. With the right person beside me. Sophia looked up at him, hardly daring to hope that he meant what she thought he did. Sophia Lawson, Cole said, his voice solemn but his eyes bright with emotion. I know we haven't known each other long, but I've never been more certain of anything in my life. I love you. I love your strength, your kindness, your beautiful spirit that not even a year of silence could dim. I love your voice, not just when you sing, but when you talk about the books you've read or the places you want to see. Tears filled Sophia's eyes as Cole continued, his words painting a picture of a future she had stopped believing was possible. I want to build a life with you, he said. A home where you'll never have to be silent again, where you can sing whenever you want, teach our children the songs your mother taught you. He took a deep breath. Will you marry me, Sophia? Will you be my wife? For a moment, Sophia couldn't speak, her heart too full for words. Then, with joy bubbling up inside her like a spring, she threw her arms around Cole's neck. Yes, she whispered against his ear. Yes, I'll marry you. Cole's arms tightened around her, lifting her off her feet as he spun her in a circle, both of them laughing with pure happiness. When he set her down, he cupped her face in his hands, his expression suddenly serious. I don't have much to offer you yet, he said. The land I've been looking at is rough and the house will be small at first. It won't be an easy life. Sophia placed her hand over his. I don't need easy, she said. I just need you." Cole's smile was like the sun breaking through clouds. Slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wished, he lowered his head and kissed her. It was Sophia's first kiss, and it was everything she had ever dreamed. It would be gentle yet passionate, tender yet filled with promise. When they finally parted, both breathless, Sophia knew with absolute certainty that this was the man she wanted to spend her life with. "We should speak to the Blackwells," Cole said, taking her hand as they resumed their walk. "Do things properly." Sophia nodded, though anxiety fluttered in her stomach at the thought. Despite the recent changes, she was still the Blackwells' maid, and Cole was their foreman. Would they approve of the match? And if they didn't, what then? "Don't worry," Cole said, seeming to read her thoughts. "Mr. Blackwell thinks highly of me, and you've become something of a favorite since that dinner party, and even if they disapprove, it won't change anything. We'll find a way." His confidence reassured her, and Sophia allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, everything would work out for the best. That evening, after serving dinner, Sophia was surprised when Mr. Blackwell asked her to remain in the dining room rather than returning to the kitchen. "Sit down, girl," he said, gesturing to the chair opposite him. Mrs. Blackwell looked as surprised as Sophia felt, but she didn't object. Hesitantly, Sophia took the offered seat, perching on the edge of the chair. "Crawford came to see me this afternoon," Mr. Blackwell said without preamble. "He tells me he's asked for your hand in marriage." Sophia's heart raced. She hadn't expected Cole to speak to Mr. Blackwell so soon. "Yes, sir," she said, lifting her chin slightly. "He has." "And you've accepted?" "I have." Mr. Blackwell nodded, as if confirming something to himself. "Crawford is a good man, hard worker, honest, knows cattle better than most men twice his age." He took a sip of his after-dinner brandy. "He tells me he's been saving to buy his own land." "Yes, sir," Sophia said, unsure where this was leading. "I've been considering selling the north section of my property," Mr. Blackwell continued, surprising both Sophia and Mrs. Blackwell, who let out a small gasp. "It's good grazing land with a year-round spring. Too far from the main house to be convenient for us, but it would make a fine start for a young couple." Sophia's eyes widened as she realized what he was suggesting. "Sir, I don't know what to say." "No need to say anything yet," Mr. Blackwell replied. "I've offered it to Crawford at a fair price with reasonable terms. He seems inclined to accept." He set down his glass, fixing Sophia with a direct gaze. "Which brings me to my next point. What do you intend to do about your position here?" Sophia had been so overwhelmed by Cole's proposal that she hadn't thought that far ahead. I suppose I would need to give notice, sir," she said. "Once we set a date for the wedding." Mrs. Blackwell spoke up for the first time. "It won't be easy to replace you," she said, her tone not unkind. "You've learned our ways and you're efficient." "Thank you, madam," Sophia said, touched by the closest thing to a compliment Mrs. Blackwell had ever given her. "There's no rush," Mr. Blackwell said. "Crawford tells me he'll need time to build a house on the property before you can marry. You're welcome to continue in your position until then." "That's very generous, sir," Sophia said, hardly able to believe her good fortune. "Not at all," Mr. Blackwell replied, a rare smile softening his usually stern features. "Consider it our wedding gift to you both." "That and the land, of course." "The land, sir?" Sophia asked, confused. "The price I'm charging Crawford is well below market value," Mr. Blackwell explained. "He's a proud man, so he insists on paying something, but I consider the discount a gift to you both." Tears sprang to Sophia's eyes. "I don't know how to thank you, sir." "You already have," Mr. Blackwell said, his voice gruff with emotion he rarely displayed. "That night you sang for our guests. It reminded me of my mother. She used to sing that same song when I was a boy." He cleared his throat. "She had a beautiful voice, like yours. I'd forgotten how much I missed hearing it until that moment. Mrs. Blackwell reached across the table to place her hand on her husband's, a gesture of tenderness Sophia had never witnessed between them. "We wish you both happiness, Mrs. Blackwell said, and though her voice was as composed as ever, there was a warmth in her eyes that Sophia had never seen before. "Thank you," Sophia said, her heart full to bursting. "Both of you, for everything." The winter of 1878 passed in a flurry of activity. Cole, with the help of several ranch hands who volunteered their time in exchange for future favors, began building a small but sturdy house on the land he had purchased from Mr. Blackwell. Sophia continued in her position at the Blackwell house, but now she sang as she worked, filling the once silent rooms with melody. She also began saving every penny of her wages, adding to the small nest egg her parents had left her, which she had managed to bring with her from Boston. With Mrs. Blackwell's unexpected guidance, she sewed linens and curtains for her future home, and even began work on a simple but elegant wedding dress. Christmas came and went, celebrated with more warmth and joy than Sophia had experienced since her parents' death. The Blackwells, to her surprise, included her in their family dinner and presented her with a lovely silver locket, a gift that moved her to tears. By March of 1879, the house was nearly complete. It was a modest structure, 2 bedrooms, a kitchen, a small parlor, and a covered porch that wrapped around 2 sides, but to Sophia, who had lived in a closet-sized room for over a year, it seemed like a palace. "It's beautiful," she told Cole as they stood on the porch one Sunday afternoon, looking out over the land that would soon be their home. The spring thaw had begun, and patches of green were starting to show through the melting snow. "It's not much," Cole said, his arm around her waist. "But it's a start, and there's room to add on as our family grows." The thought of children, their children, filled Sophia with a joy she could scarcely contain. She turned in his arms, reaching up to touch his face, now clean-shaven for their weekly visit to the house. "It's perfect," she said. "And it's ours. I can't wait to make it a home." Cole kissed her, a tender gesture that still made her heart race even after months of courtship. "2 more weeks," he murmured against her lips. "2 more weeks and you'll be Mrs. Crawford, Mrs. Sophia Crawford," she repeated, loving the sound of it. "I like that very much." The wedding was set for the last Saturday in March, to be held in the small church in Eagar where Sophia now sang in the choir every Sunday. It would be a simple ceremony, with the Blackwells, the pastor and his wife, and a few of Cole's friends from the ranch in attendance. But as the day approached, word spread through Eagar about the foreman who had fallen in love with the maid with the angel's voice, and one by one, townspeople began to ask if they might attend. By the time the day arrived, it seemed as if half the town was planning to witness the ceremony. The morning of the wedding dawned clear and mild, a perfect early spring day. Sophia woke in her small room at the Blackwell house for the last time, her heart so full of happiness she thought it might burst. Mrs. Blackwell herself helped her dress, a task she would normally have delegated to one of the other servants. As she fastened the buttons on Sophia's simple white gown, she spoke with uncharacteristic emotion. "I never had a daughter," she said, her voice soft. "I always regretted that. If I had, I would have wanted her to be like you, strong, resourceful, talented." Sophia turned to face the older woman, touched beyond words. "You've been so kind to me, Mrs. Blackwell," she said. "Even when I was just a silent maid, you treated me fairly. I'll never forget that." "You were never just anything, my dear," Mrs. Blackwell replied, adjusting the veil on Sophia's dark hair. "I knew that from the moment you arrived. I just didn't know how to show it." She stepped back, surveying her handiwork. "There, "You look beautiful. Crawford is a fortunate man." "I'm the fortunate one," Sophia said, thinking of all the twists of fate that had led her to this moment. Mr. Blackwell was waiting to escort her to the church, a role he had offered to fill in the absence of her father. As they rode in the Blackwell's carriage through the streets of Eagar, Sophia was overwhelmed by the number of people lining the route, waving and calling out good wishes. "It seems you've made quite an impression on this town," Mr. Blackwell observed, a note of pride in his voice. "I can scarcely believe it," Sophia replied, waving back to a group of children from the Sunday school where she had recently begun teaching music. "Believe it," Mr. Blackwell said. "You've brought something to Eagar that it was sorely lacking: beauty, music, kindness. People recognize that, even if they can't put it into words." The church was packed to overflowing when they arrived. As Mr. Blackwell led her down the aisle, Sophia saw faces she recognized from town, from church, from the various social gatherings where she had been asked to sing over the past few months. But she had eyes only for Cole, waiting for her at the altar, looking so handsome in his new suit that her heart skipped a beat. The ceremony was brief but beautiful. They exchanged simple vows, promising to love, honor, and cherish each other for all their days. When the pastor pronounced them man and wife, and Cole lifted her veil to kiss her, the church erupted in cheers and applause. The celebration continued at the Blackwell Ranch, where tables had been set up in the yard, laden with food prepared by Mrs. Blackwell's cook and several ladies from town. There was music and dancing, and later, as the sun began to set, Sophia sang for her guests not because anyone asked her to, but because her heart was too full of joy to contain it any longer. As twilight deepened into night, Cole led his bride away from the celebration, helping her into the wagon that would take them to their new home. They departed amid a shower of rice and good wishes, the sounds of the party fading behind them as they made their way across the open land. Their house was waiting for them, windows glowing with lamplight. Someone, perhaps Mrs. Blackwell or one of the ranch hands' wives, had been there ahead of them, lighting the lamps and the fire, turning the empty structure into a welcoming home. Cole helped Sophia down from the wagon, but before she could walk to the door, he swept her up into his arms. "What are you doing?" she laughed, wrapping her arms around his neck. "Carrying my wife across the threshold," Cole replied with a grin. "It's tradition." He carried her into the house, setting her down gently in the middle of the small parlor. For a moment, they simply stood there, taking in the reality of it: their home, their life together, beginning now. "Welcome home, Mrs. Crawford," Cole said softly, drawing her into his arms. "Home," Sophia repeated, the words sweet on her tongue. After years of feeling adrift, of having nowhere that truly belonged to her, she was home at last, not just in this house, but in Cole's arms, in his heart. Later, as they lay together in the quiet darkness of their bedroom, Sophia sang to her husband a soft, sweet lullaby that her mother had sung to her father on quiet evenings in Boston. Cole listened in silence, his fingers tracing patterns on her bare shoulder, his eyes never leaving her face. When the song ended, he kissed her with a tenderness that brought tears to her eyes. "I will never get tired of hearing you sing," he whispered against her lips. "Not if we live to be 100. "And I will never get tired of singing for you," Sophia promised, her heart full to bursting with love for this man who had heard her voice when no one else was listening. The years that followed were not without challenges. Building a ranch from scratch was hard work, and there were times when they struggled to make ends meet. But through it all, their love remained steadfast, growing deeper and stronger with each passing day. By the spring of 1880, their small herd of cattle had doubled in size, and Sophia discovered she was expecting their first child. The news filled them both with joy and a renewed determination to make their ranch prosper. Thomas Crawford was born on a snowy night in December, a healthy, strong-lunged boy with his father's dark hair and his mother's expressive eyes. As Sophia held her son for the first time, singing him the same lullaby her mother had sung to her, she felt a sense of completion, of coming full circle. The Blackwells, who had become like family to them, were named godparents to young Thomas. They doted on the boy, bringing gifts every time they visited and insisting that Sophia bring him to town whenever she came to sing at church or social gatherings. As the years passed, the Crawford ranch flourished. Cole's knowledge of cattle and his reputation for fair dealing brought him success, while Sophia's warm hospitality and musical talents made their home a center of community life in Eagar. She started a small school on their property, teaching the children of neighboring ranchers not just reading and arithmetic, but music as well. Their family grew with the birth of a daughter, Elizabeth, in 1883, and another son, James, in 1885. Their house expanded as well, with Cole adding rooms as needed, always making sure there was space for a piano in the parlor, a wedding gift from the Blackwells that had finally arrived from San Francisco on the new railroad line. By 1890, the Crawford Ranch was one of the most prosperous in Apache County. Their cattle were known for their quality, and Cole's innovative ranching methods were studied and copied by others throughout the territory. Sophia's school had grown into a proper academy, with a dedicated building and 2 additional teachers. But of all their accomplishments, they remained most proud of their family 3 healthy, curious, kind-hearted children who filled their home with laughter, learning, and, of course, music. On a warm evening in the summer of 1891, as they sat on their porch watching the sunset, Cole took Sophia's hand in his, just as he had done countless times over the years. "You ever think about that morning by the well?" he asked. "When I first heard you singing." Sophia smiled, the memory as clear in her mind as if it had happened yesterday rather than 13 years ago. "Often," she admitted. "It changed everything." "I knew then," Cole said, his voice soft with reminiscence. "I knew you were special. That you had a spirit too bright to be kept in silence. And you gave me the courage to use my voice again," Sophia said, leaning her head on his shoulder. "Not just to sing, but to speak, to teach, to stand up for what I believe in." "You always had that courage," Cole corrected her gently. "It was there, waiting. I just helped you remember it." From inside the house came the sound of their children's voices, laughing over some shared joke. The sound filled Sophia with a contentment so deep it brought tears to her eyes. "I never imagined I could be this happy," she said. That day I arrived in Eagar, standing outside the Blackwell house with nothing but a valise and a letter of recommendation. I thought the best I could hope for was safety, a roof over my head. "And now look at you," Cole said, pride evident in his voice. "The most respected teacher in the county, founder of the Eagar Musical Society, mother to 3 amazing children, and still the most beautiful woman I've ever seen." Sophia laughed, the years falling away as she turned to face the man who had been her partner, her lover, her best friend for more than a decade. "Flatterer," she accused fondly. "Just honest," Cole replied, echoing the words he had spoken by the creek all those years ago. He leaned forward, kissing her with the same tenderness, the same passion that still made her heart race after all this time. As the last light of day faded from the sky, they rose together to join their children inside. But before they stepped through the door, Sophia paused, looking out over the land that had become their home, the life they had built together. "Sing for me," Cole asked softly, knowing without her having to say it that her heart was full to overflowing in that moment. And there, on the porch of the house they had built with their own hands, Sophia sang not a sad ballad of lost love like Barbara Allen, but a song of joy, of gratitude, of a love that had found its voice and would never be silenced again. As her clear, pure notes rose into the gathering twilight, Sophia knew with absolute certainty that this moment, this life, this love was what she had been meant for all along. From the darkest days of silence had come the brightest light of her life, and she would be forever grateful to the cowboy who had heard her sing and asked her to be his.